You're listening to She's the Business podcast. My very special guest today is Kyra Yang. Kyra is a certified hypnotherapist that has been responsible for generating multi-millions in new revenue and higher entrepreneurial fulfillment for her clients. She helps entrepreneurs effortlessly break through their upper limit plateaus and hit 7 and even 8 figures through her money mindset framework, which is centered in neuroscience. And without you having to do the 3-hour morning routine that you so often see around mindset and money blocks. So you're going to love Kyra. She has a fountain of knowledge around the emotional intelligence of money and how we are approaching it, what those upper limit blocks are that we're commonly experiencing at any level in our business. So even if you're not in the millions or even close to it right now, even if you're starting out, thinking about starting, you are likely going to relate to what Kyra is talking about here, because these upper limits are happening at every level that we have in our business and in our life as we progress. And it's about being able to recognize them, work through them, and remove them. That will help you reach that next level for you. So your ceiling can be removed, and yes, it may come back again, but each time we're going to work through and remove it. So I'm about to play this interview. Stay tuned. Kyra has some incredible tips and really great questions that you can dive into. If you have your notebook and pen handy, that'll definitely be a good idea, because you might want to write some of these questions down and explore them. And she also shares with us her weekly newsletter, where she sends out a short exercise you can do every single week in order to improve your money mindset and your beliefs around money. So how fantastic is that? Thank you so much, Kyra. And without further ado, let me play this interview for you. Hello, and I am here with Kyra Yang. Kyra, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad to have you here with us today.
Hi, Jessica. I'm very excited to be here and also to dive into our conversation. It's always a good one, so I can't wait to start.
Yeah, me too. And I was saying just before we press record that it's so interesting, because Kyra is a hypnotherapist, but she works in the realms of finances and money mindset. And it's so interesting to combine these two together. So I'm just super excited about this conversation. But before we get started, can you give us, in your own words, a bit of an intro to you and who you help, what you do in your business, because I'm sure you'll say it better than I ever would.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a hypnotherapist. I have designed hypnotherapy specifically for entrepreneurs and high performers. And many of the CEOs that I work with, they're founders, executives, scaling to 7 and 9 figures. And we're really looking at, really overcoming survival states like anxiety, overwhelm, procrastination, all the things that really get in our way, and removing any glass ceilings, those upper limits that might be holding you back from, we call it your unlimited potential, but really looking at boosting your performance with the power of hypnosis using neuroscience.
Oh, amazing. And how did you get started in this? Just seems like such a unique field to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, back in 2019, I think just a year or earlier that year, I went through my Saturn return, for anyone who's somewhat spiritual. So my life was pretty much in shambles. I was going through a divorce. I was a very different person back then, doing the 9-to-5 grind. Technically had the perfect life before the divorce, but I just wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. I was very insecure. And that year I took the leap into entrepreneurship, into my first business, which is a fitness studio with one of my best friends.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we were about to open, and then the global pandemic happened. So not only had I invested every dollar that I had, there was no money to be made. I was broke and alone. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? So I had been listening to this manifestation podcast, and I thought it was a bunch of crap. I was like, there's no way this is real, but there's so much evidence. These people are finding amazing love and unbelievable money and doing all kinds of crazy things with their life. And so I was like, what do I have to lose? I have nothing else to do. And so I joined this program, and I was doing these meditations every day. I've never done personal development work prior to this.
Mm-hmm.
And my life started to change. I started to like manifest things, and I started to feel very confident and having all kinds of breakthroughs. And what I had realized shortly after was that I was actually doing self-hypnosis,
Oh,
and that it was like rooted in science, like the neuroplasticity of your mind is changing. And this is why transformation happens. So shortly after that, funny enough, one of my clients from the gym who had signed up originally and we had never opened, we connected, and I was like, I should just reach out to her. She's a life coach. And, like, it's so cringe being a life coach, like seeing her on Instagram. Like, I was still that person, right? Funny enough,
yes.
I am today. And, she was like, I actually see a hypnotherapist. And I was like, what do you mean you see a hypnotherapist? She's like, this is a career. Like, this is a full industry. And it was like in that moment, it was like crystal clear as day. I was like, this is what I'm meant to be doing. I was like, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've always wanted to be a therapist, but I didn't want to go back to school because I went to school for finance. It was like extremely grueling, and it just all made sense. So at that point, I took like, I think it was like the last like few $1,000s I had left to like become a hypnotherapist. And after that, it was like a whole story. But, I signed my first client. It was like $1,000, like literally day one. And it just took there, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't always a easy journey, but I think that's where a lot of the evolution happened because we go through the niches where I started off as a hypnotherapist generalist, right, doing like habits, like getting over bad habits and weight loss, and then it moved into confidence coaching, then manifestation, and then business. And then I started to get approached by people for money mindset. I'd never promoted myself in that way. And I do money mindset a little bit differently than what we commonly see with like the affirmations and online and things like that. Like I don't do any of that, and we'll dive into that. But one of the big things too after that, it was, really looking at high performers, because I grew up with immigrant parents and I was expected to excel. And that was the only way that I knew how to be, and my self-worth depended on it. And that revealed a whole nother side of hypnosis and performance for individuals who have already achieved success, but really wanting to go to the impossible. But really at that point, it's not really about how to make money anymore. It's like how to sustain the level of success and continue to grow, right? And it's all mental at that point. So 90% of it, I would say. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
Yeah.
But it's, I think we all kind of go through this where we have our own personal transformation or some sort of insight into it. And then we're like, wow, like I want to help people too.
Oh, that's so amazing. Yeah, I can totally relate to that as well. The high achiever, the high expectations that definitely come from parents. And then, that is where your self-worth gets so much tied to. It's incredible.
Yes.
And yeah, just seeing how you can move through, the change from, I guess in the beginning, people are afraid of failure, meaning, well, what if this doesn't work? And then when you are successful, it's like, well, what if it stops working? Like you're kind of more afraid to lose it at that point, aren't you?
100%. And self-worth is one of the biggest, I would say, upper limit mindset barriers for really like anybody, but especially at high levels, exactly what you said, like, what if I lose it? Like, what if I can't sustain it? Because we learn from a very young age that we are loved and celebrated when we are popular, when we come first, when we're achieving, when we get straight A's. We're, really shown a lot of love, and like we're seen. And like as kids, like we don't know anything better, right? This is like when predominantly most of our subconscious programs are created, 0 to 7. And when we're not doing that, like say we kind of get bad grades, or like the bad child at the grocery store, or we're not behaving in the way that we're supposed to, right? Or getting compared to like other people's children, like we're getting criticized, or maybe met with like anger. My dad used to yell at me when I used to like get a wrong note on the piano. I'm like 4 years old, like crying out my eyes, right? And we also then learn, okay, so like if I'm not perfect, if I'm not acting this certain way, if I'm not achieving, if I'm not seen in this particular way, I'm going to be met with pain. I'm going to be met with conflict and consequence. And I feel ashamed of myself. And you're led to believe something's wrong with you unless you are being perfect, right? And that's where we loop that deep validation of self-worth, where we have to look for it outside of us. We're looking kind of for that gold star, someone telling you like, hey, that was good, which is why when we become entrepreneurs, it's one of the biggest things to reprogram, because we are looking for the money to confirm. We are looking for our clients to be like, you're valuable, like your work is so worth it. But the thing is, we have to have it first before we get it from anyone else, because it's kind of the chicken and the egg situation. We're waiting for the evidence of the next level that we have not yet built, right? Like this is where people feel like the imposter syndrome. I see this in some of my clients who have literally generated over 9 figures of revenue. Okay. Like this does not go away because you're going somewhere you have never been before, right? But this is one of the biggest things, because if you can change the way that you see yourself, change your self-perception, reprogram and unlearn those validation loops, whereas you're not looking for the outside, like the money in the bank or the number of sales, or if you have a good or bad month. If that throws you, you're going to have a really hard time sustaining success, right? So if you can detach from all of those old conditionings where your worth is not validated by the number in your bank account or how many clients you have or how well you did or how big the contract like the house you have, like whatever, right? Like, is it the Lamborghini? Like none of that really matters. It's a byproduct of your success. But when you cannot make it mean something about you, your internal belief and self-trust, that power that you have within you, nothing is going to shake you. And that's going to be the best place where you can perform the best, because you're the most present, you're the most certain of yourself, and you're going to move forward with conviction in a way that's like unstoppable. Like, you see those people that are so magnetic and they just go for it and it seems like they're fearless and all the opportunities open up and they're so lucky. It's because they get after it way more than anyone else, any average person does.
Oh, there's so much in that. You can just imagine someone who's like making 9 figures and then still going, am I really worth it? Like that kind of self-doubt inside, like the little child.
He said, I feel like a failure. Like he's like, I actually feel like a failure still. Like I'm not super successful. And I'm like, and this is what I mean. It's like your self-perception of yourself is very different from what others see. And it really doesn't matter what others think, but we need to get our self-perception to a place that's very high worth, where we are innately valued, we're innately good enough, not needing to be validated by the outside, because that gives us the most empowerment, control, and choice to take action now towards the goals that we want. That's how we close the gap faster, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. And I think looking back, you can see how we're just conditioned to that external validation throughout school, even in employment. When you're an employee, you're looking for, good work from your boss, promotions, or you're getting graded against your colleagues, and you're like, everything is about that external validation, and you're looking for it so much externally. I think that when you come into entrepreneurship, you are the boss. Like you actually have to validate yourself. You've got to appreciate, acknowledge yourself. And that, I think, is one of those things that can just be so difficult to do, or to be aware of that you're not doing. And why so many people are like, I struggle coming in here and being on my own. It's because you're not getting that feedback, are you, from someone else?
And with society, there's a lot of like rules that you can just follow. But here, like, they're all up to you. Like you're the one creating them. There's no 10-step rule book to becoming successful, right? There's a lot of strategies and a lot of support that you absolutely should receive, and please do. But it's a really big part of becoming an entrepreneur. And the validation piece, if you can, like, this is precisely what I do with my clients. When you can have the emotional intelligence, because to your point, when we are making decisions, right? Like as an entrepreneur, your job is to problem solve and make decisions, right? Like these are the two biggest things that you do, right? And when we can be in really like clear headspace where we're not worrying about like, like, will this suck? Will this fail? What if I lose it all? Like we're making, like, will I make people upset? Like, especially with high level negotiations, sales, even like, what if they don't buy? What if they say no? You start playing so you don't lose. Like you're trying to like not lose out because you're feeling scared that you're going to like lose the contract, or you're going to make people really upset with the restructure because you have to let some people go, or whatever it might be, right? There's some new systems in place that they're not going to like, and they're all going to talk about you and hate you, right? You're playing not to lose. And they're not always the decisions that are best for the company, best for the business, best for you, best for the profit margins. You're just trying to make everyone happy, right? It's like that people pleasing validation cycle. This is how it shows up, right?
Right.
And we're more concerned with how we look and what people will think. And, even with social media, will I look dumb? What if my ideas aren't good? What if that launch fails? Like all the ways in which we're trying to survive and protect ourselves. Whereas when we're not thinking those things, again, like we want to reprogram you out of survival into a state of just neutrality. And we're going to talk about a lot of that today.
Yes. Yeah.
Your brain's capacity, number one, is very limited. It's about like 128 bits per second that you can process information. We're being inundated with billions. If most of your brain's capacity is dealing with like how not to lose, right? Making decisions that are like much smaller. This is when we hear about like you're like playing small, right? You're not really going to the full potential. You're not really like executing the idea or sharing those ideas in the room or whatever, making the big decisions that are necessary to scale to the next level, right? So when we're not doing that and we can clear up our mind and open it, we have so much more capacity, right? Like for problem solving, innovation, creativity, for positivity, for optimism, all those intangible resources, what I love to call mindset currency, that's my framework, that allow us to perform at our maximum capacity, because in any given day, we only have so much mental capacity and physical energy to execute in our business and our lives, like, with family, friends, all of the good things. Like our lives are much bigger than business. That's another thing we have to remember.
Yeah.
And so, when we can open ourselves up to that, you're going to be in a place of clarity where you're not clouded and your judgments are not clouded by the past, your traumas, right? You're actually just present and open to the possibility of everything that you can create, right? So this is a very powerful position to be in, and the best place to make high quality decisions and have the actual energetic capacity to execute, right? Because your execution, it's not sexy, but it's the only thing that's getting you results in your business. Like you can think all you want and plan all you want. And that's another thing that you're in survival analysis paralysis, the procrastination, right? The high level anxiety, one bad comment, you're like off in a spiral. You see an email, you're overwhelmed all day, right? Like these are the things that if we can get you out of, how much more could you achieve and how much more of the potential that that you're capable of, attain it, right? That's why people feel so mad at themselves. They're so hard on themselves because they're like, why am I getting in my way? And it's really just big beliefs.
I have a question for you, and then I want to move into talking a little bit about the hypnosis piece. But the question that came to mind is, we're talking about playing small, and the things that you're saying, I was like, oh, that resonates so much, and I'm sure it resonates for a lot of people. The question I have is, how do you know when you're actually playing small, or if it's your brain being the inner critic criticizing you and saying you're playing small, but maybe you are sort of where you're meant to be right now? And I guess it's that, you can get so much conflicting advice. Some people are like, you are where you're meant to be, be in the moment, the present, like have your goal. And then there's also they're playing small. And what happens inside my head is this argument starts up like, oh, no, you're playing small. Am I really? And then they go back and forth. So how do you really get to the bottom of it to go, yes, I am playing small and I need to, now start to look at how do I remove these things that are keeping me safe? Or obviously we want to be safe, but we want to be pushing that to the limit where you are still safe, but you are making some bigger decisions versus, where you maybe are already doing those things, and maybe your brain, being the overachiever, is super critical and just trying to shame you for not being further ahead.
I hear that and see that all the time about like, I should be further along, right? Like that story, right? And typically there's a couple of things we want to look at. So number one, we're looking at upper limits, right? So especially when we're like playing small, there's 3 upper limits that I predominantly see: one rooted in safety, one rooted in sacrifice, and one rooted in self-worth, right? So self-worth we talked about, where you can feel yourself feeling like a fake or imposter, or kind of like doubting your value all the time, or like even if you hit success, you're kind of like, was that just like a one-time luck kind of thing? Like you just can't believe your success no matter how much you create, right? So in that scenario, you're going to keep yourself small from going for bigger opportunities, right? Like if you're pitching podcasts, you'll only pitch the podcasts that have like small views or like are brand new, but you'll never pitch the podcast that has like 1 million like subscribers, right? Because you're in your mind about it, right? But why, right? So self-worth is number one. And self-worth is a big piece because your self-worth is a direct reflection of how much you say, like, I'm good enough now, not like conditional, not like when I achieve X goal, then I can go do the Y thing, right? No. You
Yes.
just can do it now. Why aren't you choosing it now? Number two, sacrifice. This is really common. The cost of success for many people is too high, right? There's burnout. They're losing the passion for what they do. They're like not having any work-life balance. They're like family life and relationships are hanging by a thread. And they're like, if I feel like this now, if I go to the next level, is there going to be more of this? Like, I can barely handle it already, right? Like, is this even worth it, right? And on top of that, it's like a growing pressure and responsibility the bigger you get, right? More people to manage, more livelihoods that you're taking care of, bigger contracts, like numbers that you've never seen before, right? There's a lot of pressure, and like the weight of your decision, it has a huge ripple effect, right? So like there's this like really intense pressure for someone who has not done the deeper work, right? We're looking at like serious emotional intelligence here.
Yes.
And the third one that we're looking at is safety, right? It's that being an entrepreneur, we all know, is extremely lonely. Okay. Nobody gets you, even the people that love you, unless they're entrepreneurs too, right? But it's a very lonely journey that you're forging on your own. And you may already feel isolated. You might feel depressed. You might feel like your physical and mental health are suffering. You might also feel as though like the more successful you become, the more isolated you become because people don't like relate to you anymore, right? Especially if you didn't come from a lot. This is where the money thing comes in. And now you're like driving to the family thing in like a Porsche. And they're like, who does she think she is? Right. And you fear that you're going to be left behind or you're going to leave people behind. Right. Fear of loss of people is one of the biggest things that holds people back.
Wow.
And so when we're looking at those upper limits, the big question you want to ask yourself is two things, right? Number one, what is the consequence of getting what I want, right? Like of getting to the next level. The ones that I talked about already, these are kind of like the biggest common ones that I see, right? What is the consequence of getting what you want, right? The second side of things is if you're like, there are no consequences. I just want it. Of course, I want more money, more visibility, and success. The second side is what is actually the benefit of staying where you are, right? So like if you've just like arrived here and you're like, oh my God, like I know I want to do the thing but it's just like such a struggle and like an uphill battle. Oh my God, I don't want to do that again. Right. So like the perceived consequence subconsciously is greater than the potential benefit. So you won't move. We don't move towards consequence and pain, like period. Just don't. So those are the two questions. And the third thing you want to also look at is like, what is it that you know you need to be doing, but you're not doing it because you feel scared or because you feel there's some sacrifice or you feel like
avoiding it.
You're avoiding it, right? Like procrastination is not about like the Pomodoro technique, which is also great. I love it, right? Like it's not going to solve anything if you have a mental block that there is some sort of consequence waiting for you, right? So those are the three questions I would say, because it's like, if you know that you need to do it, but you don't do it, that's when you know you're playing small. There's a reason. Ask yourself why. Right. And I agree with you. There is a time and place to be present, to enjoy where you're at. But the biggest thing is the other indication of like, how do I know if I'm not being too self-critical? Right. Like, how do I know I'm not pushing too much? Because I see that in a lot of high achievers where they're like, but I'm not there yet. And like, I should have been there. And like, you know, I could have been there 5 years ago if I didn't like, you know, fall in love or like, you know, to waste time doing this or like make the wrong. Okay. It's like, listen, we're like living life. It's okay. We're meant to live life. But the big thing is if you can accept the now while knowing that you're moving towards more, like you don't feel like you're behind, right? That's the biggest signal. Like you're like I feel good where I am. Of course, I'm moving towards more. I deeply know that I'm moving towards more, but I can accept the here and now. Right.
Yeah.
So like that's a big indicator. But if you feel like you're constantly rushing and like you're never there yet and you're always running out of time, that's just going to lead to burnout. And again, this is subconscious survival pushing you because deep down you feel like you're never going to be good enough. So you're again always chasing that next hit of validation to feel safe. But again, it's outside of you. It's going to be fleeting. So you push and push and push. And the other thing too is that if it is a self-worth issue as well, validation cycles, you're always going to overcompensate, always like the work hard, struggle, be the first in, last out. Like all of this narrative is going to run you into the ground and you're not going to have sustainable success. Like people, I remember having one client, she almost quit her like multi-million-dollar business. She's like, I can't take it anymore. I don't. And then she completely turned it around in 1 year, right? So these are the things that we want to look at, because our mental state will dictate, like, when you don't feel good, you don't want to do anything. Like this time of the month, if you're sick, if you're hungover, like if you just feel bad, breakup, heartbreak, you're out, right? But if you feel calm, clear, like confident, convicted, like you're unstoppable, right? So like, if we can manage your energy based on your mental state, the deep subconscious, right? This is what's going to change how you can perform and really what you can achieve, but with some balance and like to feel happy while doing it, right? Like feel some peace. Like this is not some like endless chase, because we've been taught subconsciously to perform our whole lives.
That's so true. And I think what you're talking about here, I guess joining the dots or reading between the lines, is this is really what the benefit of hypnosis can be for high achievers, right? But before we talk more about hypnosis, could you just tell us a bit more what it actually is when you're doing hypnotherapy, in this business sense? What is it and what is it not? Because we've probably all seen things about it. We might have seen some TV shows with some people breathing crazily. Let's talk about what it's actually like in real life.
Yeah. So like you said, most people have seen the entertainment side of hypnosis, which is a thing, right? Like you hear about people clucking like a chicken or like the swinging pocket watch and, all of that jazz. And really, when we're looking at hypnosis for transformation, what we're doing is changing past pain into power. And what I mean by that is typically from the ages of 0 to 7, more specifically 2 to 6, when you're a child and you're like so free and you believe you can do anything, like you're like the doctor saving lives or the astronaut going to space or, the pageant queen, right? And you believe it's real. We're predominantly operating in theta brainwave states. That is also the age that we pick up programs about money, success, love, everything that we believe about ourselves, right? So for example, my parents were immigrants. They came here with $200. They made it for themselves, upper middle class. I had a really good upbringing, but they were extremely scarce, right? Like very frugal, save everything, marry rich, like never have credit card debt. If you do, you'll end up on the streets. Your life will be ruined, like all of this narrative, right? And even though saving is good and, all those good things, the primary emotion around it was fear, right? Like if I didn't save, I'll end up on the streets, right? So like, even though it's a good thing, I was driven by fear. Okay. That's not a very empowered choice. Okay. And so when we think about everything that we have in our lives, and you can take inventory, like just take a look around, there's some sort of program at play. And the thing is, a lot of the time, we don't know the program that we selected because we observed it as a child and then we accepted it. Just kind of like the example I gave earlier, where we're like, I did something good, gold star. And then I cried and then I got hit. Okay. Oh no. Right. Like don't do that again. Right. That's an extreme example, but you quickly learn, just like a child touching a hot oven, like you don't do it again. Right. So what did we pick up that we don't know that is currently creating sabotage in money, success, love, all of those good things in our lives. Right. And you'll know this to be true if like, one thing, but you're not doing it. Like if you're like, I know better, but I can't I can't help but do the other behavior, right? The toxic relationship. I know I should leave, but I keep staying, right? Even though everyone is telling you to, like your girlfriend tells you every week, right? And you're not happy, but for some reason you stay. It's a subconscious program, right? So that's a big sign. And when we are actually in hypnosis in modern day as an adult, we access those same theta brainwave states that you were in as a child, right? This is the state in which higher levels of neuroplasticity can happen. And when we look at neuroplasticity, we have to change those past pains, where you learned you weren't good enough, where you learned that you weren't capable, where you learned that you were stupid, right? Where you learned like whatever limiting belief that you hold, because again, somebody placed it on you. Right? You saw it, you felt shame, you believed it, right? Because limiting beliefs only occur when we make a decision as a child. Just like when you're like, I don't want to touch the hot oven again. That happened for a split second. You didn't even have to think about making that decision. You just made it in your mind, right? Limiting decisions work the same way. Limiting beliefs. We made a choice unconsciously as a child, which then colored the rest of our lives. And so what we do is that we dissociate you from the past pain, right? Because again, we only don't move. We are only stuck if we feel badly, right? Negative emotions. And there's nothing wrong with negative emotions, just when they're associated with incorrect programming. When we can change the association and instead also not only do that, but replace it with an empowering belief about yourself, a new truth, right? Because you didn't come out of the womb being like, I suck, I'm not good enough. You learned that, right? So like, let's go back to a time when you were free of that limitation because you were, and so you can be now, right? So we're really looking at changing the past pain so that you can be empowered now with new empowering decisions, which again, your decisions, how you see yourself, your self-worth, your identity, that's your subconscious mind. That's 95% of your mind. Your self-worth, your identity will determine how you think about yourself, right? Again, positive thoughts. We'll talk about those too. We'll promote positive feelings and then positive, empowered action towards your goals. So we really, at the end of the day, this goes beyond, when we think about like mindset coaching or affirmations, things like that, we're not talking about giving you advice or trying to think another way. We're shifting your actual core beliefs so that you can actually change your behavior. Because again, your behavior is the only thing that's going to change your reality, right? Your behaviors around money will change your wealth. Your behaviors around dating and relationships will change how, like the type of relationship, the quality, the depth, the intimacy, right? You change the relationship to yourself, how you treat yourself, what your boundaries are. It all ripple effects.
I love that. I can just see it can be so broad, and then bringing it being really specific as well, because we're talking here about money, emotional intelligence, and business success. So do you want to dive into that a little bit more and tell us, how does this relate to, having that emotional intelligence around money specifically and removing that glass ceiling? Because, we're all here for it. I'm like, ready for this.
So money is always one of those topics that people love to talk about. But when we think about money, right, money predominantly, the primary emotions, as I mentioned earlier, are fear, guilt, and shame, right? And again, my own personal example, I was saving, which is a very positive thing, but I felt a lot of fear if I didn't and guilt if I didn't, right? Like something's wrong with me, like you should be saving more, right? And so when we think about those programs, a lot of the things that we've heard before, right? You may have heard like, money doesn't grow on trees. You have to work really, really hard. There may have been like conflict around money, like, struggling to pay bills, or you may have actually came from money, but like hid it because you didn't want to be different. You don't want people to use you. Like they're going to come after you if you have money. Like there's all kinds of dialogue. If you have money, like rich people are greedy, they take from the poor, you'll become a bad person, you'll change. So as you can see, a lot of these stories, there's a narrative and a theme that money is hard to come by. Okay. This is why most people live in scarcity. And we'll talk about abundance, an abundance mindset as well. And, so most people live in scarcity, but most people as well feel that money is predominantly not positive, right? Like the feelings around it is that like, you'll essentially become a bad person if you have more money, right? Like you should be ashamed. You should be giving it away. This is actually why people also become broke too, right? So even when they have money, right? So that's the big thing that we want to look at. And when we have those programs created from the ages of 0 to 7, they will color the rest of our lives. How we create money, how we save money, how we spend money. You ever get like a big bill and, you might be at the grocery store, maybe like Whole Foods, and it's like an amazing, you're like, all these organic groceries, yay. And you get the bill, it's like $300 and like your heart drops. Why? Right? Like it's just a number on the screen. You're just paying for some groceries, but like you can feel the body constricting, even like before you press pay online, like, you feel yourself tighten. Why? Right? We've been conditioned, right? It's like an automatic response. So like anything in your life that you feel is an automatic response, like anxiety, procrastination, like anything like that, it's subconscious, right? There's a way to undo it. So when we look at money, the biggest thing that we want to look at is money neutrality, because when we look at the truth about money, money is just a tool. right? We've heard this before. It's a neutral resource. It's something that you can utilize to leverage yourself, your current level of wealth, to build more, right? But you hear all the time, right? Like never be in debt, all of those stories, right? All the fear and shame around money. And so the biggest thing that we have to understand is that money is neutral to be leveraged like a tool, just like you would use any great tool in your toolbox to build something in your house, or, even in the coaching space, like you have lots of great tools to use with your clients. But the second thing is that money is always available, right? We're told that it's going to run out, especially again, that there was a narrative around like living paycheck to paycheck, and there was fights around money and struggles around money and hardship. And the truth is, people are buying and selling every second of the day. There's like transactions happening all over the world, right? Money's being printed every single day, right? It's literally never running out. And especially as an entrepreneur, like there are so many ways that you can make money, right? Like this business that you have, you could be doing passive products online, Amazon dropship. You can have a brick and mortar. You could sell your feet pictures if you wanted. There's literally like endless ways to do it, right?
Yeah.
Most people don't think that there is. They think that the one avenue that they think will give them the most validation, they want to be seen, right? Like as a lawyer or a successful coach. And if they don't make it in that one avenue, they're a failure. They are ashamed of themselves. Like they didn't make it. But the truth is, like, if I lost everything tomorrow, I'd just get a part-time job somewhere and build another business, right? Like when we can see the world as like endless opportunities, this is really the abundant mindset, right? This goes beyond money. It's seeing the world through the lens of so much opportunity. And we can choose to create that opportunity for ourselves. You'll never really feel the scarcity again, right? Like there's always more. You could get a minimum wage job tomorrow. You will make money. You will be fine. It's never actually running out, right? And so when you look at that, and then you also understand, when I think about my personal journey, when I was broke and like the pandemic happened, I had everything in my other business and like no idea when we were going to start again. I was like, I don't have any money. I do need to start like investing in coaches in my business because I am certified, but I certainly don't know how to run a coaching business or do any of that other stuff that well yet. Yeah. And, I think about, it was like 70K on credit cards, which like goes against every fiber of my being, right? I was like, oh my gosh, like I could never tell my parents, right? Like it would be the end of the world. But I knew that the skills I was going to gain, mindset, strategy, all the things were only going to help leverage my position because I had a deep belief that I could do it. So like, if you look at that as I'm like, oh, this will be temporary. And then I ended up doing I think shortly after the first year, like 80K in a month, right? So it's like, I didn't have to worry about it anymore. Nice. But the thing is, right, it's like I had to take that leap. But if I had all the stories around money that held me back from making the decisions that were necessary so that I could leverage myself to the next level of income, right? And we'll always feel this way, especially at the next level, because your decision, again, like you could in theory lose it all, right? But the thing is, there's always going to be more. So it comes down to like more than just about money. It's like, again, like that reflection of self-belief, right? And, again, when we look at money neutrality, it's really important that we undo these stories because, again, it will determine how you spend, how you create, how you invest, right? I used to think that I could never make more than $100,000 a year. I would always apply for jobs that were just under $100,000 a year because my parents put it on a pedestal. They're like, if you made $100,000 a year, like you'd be so successful and like you'll never have to worry about money again, which I now know is really not that much money. And that's still a good amount of money, but like in the grand scheme of things, as I scale and you expand your mind around money. And I never created the opportunity for myself. And my first year alone in coaching, I made more than $100,000, right? So it's just one of those things where it's like, what are the limits that you're creating around money for yourself? And the big question, I actually have a couple exercises for my newsletter, which we'll link in the show notes, but a couple of money newsletter pieces, one about like core money programming and like really how to take inventory and get the process started if this is new for you and how to start reprogramming. Because when we can feel neutral around money and really look at it as a tool, just like, I don't know, something in your house that you feel neutral about, like, again, you're going to feel very clear about the decision you're going to make, right?
Yeah.
And you will always make, and of course you have to like do some like analysis and risk tolerance and all those things, but money will never hold you back from doing what you need to do to get to your next level. But if you are held back by the fear of money, the scarcity of money, you won't make those decisions, like whether that's like expanding with a national brand, whether that's even hiring your next team member, whether that's like hiring the next coach that you know that you need. If you hold yourself back, you won't get there as quickly as you may not get there, but you definitely won't get there as quickly as you could, right? So you want to make sure that, again, when we remove fear, scarcity, those survival states around money, we can reprogram your mind around it so you can feel neutral. You'll make a decision that's much more clear and that's much more aligned with the person you want to become, which is the decision that you need to be making today.
I love that. And I love how you said, you know, it's like, yes, taking a leap, but you're actually investing. It's not an expense going out to you. Like, I'm spending $70,000 on coaching, but it's not like that's just then gone and now you're a deficit. It's actually like you've invested in something that will allow you to make even more, as you proved, because you literally made that back in a month, right? So I think that is such a huge shift. And the other thing I see often in the entrepreneurial space is when people are charging their clients, it's almost like they're thinking, I can't take that money from them. And I'm always like, yes, they are paying you, but you're not taking money from them and then they won't have that money. Again, they're investing in themselves. And who are you to prevent them from doing that, right? Like, they're
100%
investment to get a bigger return. And it's like, I love that you've just described how abundant, like, money's being printed every day. It's flowing through all of us, even without you realizing it, because you go down to the shop, you're buying your milk and bread, buying anything every day. It's flowing through you and it's coming to you and flowing out. And I think that is such a great thing to just be present to and think about, because it can feel very finite when you're looking at a number in your bank account, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what do you do? Like, what are those major things that you see people struggling with most, and how do you shift past it?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing is just really start by taking inventory about what the stories predominantly were and where you feel the most kind of fear around money in your life, right? Like, these are like really big clues and indications about what needs to be reprogrammed. And just to our point, when we can also like open ourselves up and our mind setups to like more than one way of money coming in, right? Even like free stuff or opportunities, like, this is all money. Okay. And most people are so focused on like the end result, like the dollar in the bank account, which is totally fair. Okay.
Yeah.
But there are steps to getting to that end amount. And, we have to remember, like, what is the next step? It's not even really about like having, how do I best put this? The focus is in the wrong place if all you're thinking about is how do I get to X dollars, right? We need to think about, again, this non-sexy habits that are required today, the decision that is necessary to align ourselves with having X dollars. What do I need to do today? What are all the habits? What are all of those choices and decisions? That is where the focus needs to be. And the biggest thing, as we mentioned earlier, is to be present. Like, when we are present, there's nothing to worry about. Okay. There are always going to be challenges. I don't care if you're starting out, even still at your 9 to 5, or you are generating over 9 figures. There are always problems and challenges. It's never going to go away, right? But duality always exists. But it's how we are able to manage our mindset, right? And not project our past trauma into the present, right? So that we can stay clear. And again, just focus on the next step, because it's all that we need. And then if we're too inside of the event where we're like, oh my God, like my bills and the emails, zoom out, right? We need to work with timelessness and like zoom out and say like, okay, where am I going? If I give myself 3 years, 5 years to get to the goal, do I have time? Plenty of time, right? So we have to work with like manipulating time in our minds. Again, everything is a perspective, and it's kind of this game of mental gymnastics. But specifically when we talk about even charging, right? It's a big thing, because your value, your self-worth is in question many of the times, or like, you know, you feel like you're taking from people or you're a bad person, right? If you think you're a bad person, you're taking from people, you're not going to take from anyone. You're not going to, you know what I mean? Like, you're not charging what you want because you innately think you're bad. Nobody wants to be bad because everyone wants to be liked, right? Or they want to be accepted and loved, right? So why would you do that activity? You won't. You'll actually self-sabotage yourself out of money, out of profits, right? And to your point, you don't have a gun to this person's head being like, buy my program, right? No, they're making an empowered choice, so let them, right? And reflect on your self-worth in relation to the money. It's not about the money, but you're questioning, is it worth it? Can I deliver all of these questions? This is what I commonly see, right? Is it going to be perfect? Is it going to be good enough? What if I mess it up and then they leave a bad review? My whole business goes under, right? Like the catastrophic thinking. What we have to recognize is that, are you doing your best, right? And are your intentions and integrity there? Do you know that you can help this person on what you're selling them, right? The money is just a byproduct, right? But the energetic exchange of what you're offering them, that's where the value lies. Because when you ask people, can you do it for free? They're like, yeah, no problem. But as soon as money gets involved, they're all like, oh no. So if you could put the money aside, what would you be doing in all decisions? Investing, charging, like what would you actually be doing? What do you feel comfortable enough, which a little bit of stretch because we need to challenge ourselves.
Yeah.
That's what you should be going with. That's the decision you should be making, right? So really understanding and reframing, this person like needs your help and they want your help or else they wouldn't be here. Nobody's forcing them, right? And really reintegrate, like, am I in integrity? Am I, you know, delivering the value that I know I can, right? If it was free, then it doesn't matter if you're charging 2,000, 10,000, whatever it is, right? But you have to be able to get your energy around it and play with that, right? Like, that was like a big thing for me. I started playing around with like prices on like every sales call, like see what I can get my energy behind. Because if you're like, oh, it's like 4,000 a month, like, and if you don't like that, then like we can do like a payment plan. And then you start to like self-sabotage and you're like, why did I just do that? Like, why did I backtrack? And they haven't even said anything yet. You've just like shot yourself in the foot, right? And so, you know, play with numbers. They're just numbers, right? And we have to normalize them.
Yes.
Right. And a big thing I actually find that's super helpful, that doesn't require hypnosis, that is just start finding people who find this money to be small, to be normal, right? Because they're like, what are you talking about? That's nothing. Right. And it starts to feel normal to you. But if everyone in your world is like, whoa, like my parents and like everyone of their friends was like, wow, you could make $100,000. Is it life changing? It made it feel like it was on some sort of very far away pedestal that was not meant for me, that I was not able to achieve, right? So that's a big thing. Normalize big numbers. I understand it now, but when I think back, it was a very good exercise where one of my coaches a long time ago was like, imagine if you had like $10 by a windowsill and it blew away. How would you feel? I was like, I feel fine. And she's like, what if it was $100? I would still feel fine. And then she kept increasing it. Whatever you get to the point where you're like, I would not feel fine, that's the number you want to start to normalize and find evidence of it somewhere in the world, whether that's books or famous people where they're making like $1 billion. And that would probably like be like $1 to them if $100 blew out the window. So again, that's just like mental gymnastics, what your perception is around money and starting to understand, like, even for example, all rich people have debt, but debt that's leverage, normalizing debt. Right. And so, and timelines with money, like anything like really worthwhile is going to be a long-term investment. So invest in yourself. You're going to be a very good long-term investment. Right. So there's all kinds of ways we can think about money.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so, I love the examples that you've shared. And, you know, I was thinking so interesting because we'll often compare it to something, so, you know, I think not really fully consciously, but we might think, oh, you know, $300, I'm not paying $300 for that course. But then you go into the supermarket, like you said, and you haven't even bought a week's worth of groceries and it's, you know, $300 and you're handing that over without even thinking about it. And it's so interesting because it's like, it's the same amount and it can actually be nothing. But for some things, you'll be looking at it thinking, well, that's ridiculous. I'm not paying that. Or it feels like so much. And it's kind of like, well, let's actually compare it and see, is it really a high amount, or are we just thinking that whatever it is isn't worth that amount? And is that really valid as well? Because it's so interesting, I think, how we can just put, it's like we've got our blinkers on and we're looking at a number and making some kind of decision about it or judgment on it, like without
and many
thinking.
times unconsciously, exactly, right? And one of the biggest mindset shifts to have, if you already haven't explored this one, is instead of looking at the cost of something, right? Because this is like a very lack mentality, like, oh my gosh, like it's $300, right? It's like, what is the opportunity cost of not doing it? Right? Like, so like if you suffer from like poor gut health and like inflammation and getting organic groceries is good for you, is it like, oh my God, like the food is so expensive, or it's like, oh my gosh, like this is going to help me live like an extra 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. I think about even like my Dyson Airstraight. It's like an $800 hair straightener and my hair is bleached, right? It's dry, it's frail. I do all the masks, everything, but it's super low heat. It's 150 degrees Fahrenheit, and most flat irons are like 400 plus. So it's like, am I looking at a $700 hair straightener, or am I looking at like longevity of my hair health so that I can continue to bleach, it stays healthy and it looks shiny, right? Same thing goes with investing, right? What is the opportunity of not investing with that coach, right? You could spend years trying to figure it out, but all of the potential revenue that you're not making right now, that a couple mindset shifts in strategy, in your mindset, whatever it might be, could unlock 20, 50, 100K instantaneously. And it's not magic. You have to put in the work. You have to get your mindset around doing the work, right? Build momentum. But again, a lot of the time we can't see what we can't see, right? So what is the opportunity cost that you were leaving on the table by not making that decision today? This is a very wealthy way of thinking, because when we look at like the potential opportunity we're missing out on, the cost is very small in comparison.
Yeah, I love that. And I wanted to dive back in just to reiterate something that you said, because I was like, that is where it really changed for me, was removing that emotion around the money, especially when I'm telling someone, a potential client, what the price is. When I first started, I've shared this before if someone's been listening to my podcast a while, but my very first discovery calls, I was so afraid of saying anything. I'd say, I'll email it to you. I didn't even tell them the price on the call. Yeah. That's how bad it was. And I kind of very quickly thought, you know what, I need to come from a place of leading. And so I did a bit of work to, get comfortable with this and actually say the number and not just say it and then be scared. But it didn't happen like overnight. It wasn't like I just did something and it changed. And I probably was a little bit nervous at first saying the numbers. And then it's got to the point then where I like the emotions totally out of it. I'm like, this is the number, what it is. I'm 100% behind it. Like you say, like, it's like I'm energetically behind this number. And I'm not caring whether they're going to say yes or no. Well, yes. I do care because I want to help them, but it's not. I'm
of course.
Like, oh my God.
And we still care about money. We still care about the money, right? But the big thing with that, what you're saying is like another big thing that has to be reprogrammed in tandem with money is your normalizing failure and rejection, right? That's like the big piece around validation, where somebody says no, or they don't like the price, or you make it personal, like something is wrong with you, that you're not good enough, that you'll never make it, that no one's going to sign it at this price. It's like you catastrophize, right? So it's like, we need to normalize failure and rejection. Like if someone says no, like that's okay. Like they, maybe you need to refine your sales process. Maybe you need to work on your offer. Maybe they just weren't the right client. There's so many other reasons why, other than you suck or you're not good enough. You're never going to make it, right? So when we stop making it personal, because again, like we're subconsciously ingrained to like, if they don't say yes, something's wrong with us. Oh no, we're not good enough. End of the world, Armageddon mind, right? Like everything's over, right? And that's why it's gonna end. Like that's why people go into anxiety spirals and paralyzed for the rest of the day. And they're like, I'll do my business tomorrow. And it's like, no, right? Like there is a solution to this. And again, the opportunity cost of like that day or week that like you could have been building momentum in your business. Like, what is that worth, right? Like how much closer could you be to where you want to be, right? So that's another big thing that's really important to look at, is that like, when you can understand, like, it's really not a big deal. And that takes some reprogramming around your self-worth, around like understanding failure and rejection are completely normal and necessary. And the more you get rejected, good. That means you're creating actually a lot of opportunity for yourself. I had one coach tell me, go out and get 100 no's and I bet you can't get there. I never did.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Because
I
I
didn't
think
want
as
to
soon,
pitch.
yeah, and as soon as you're not worried about the no, I think you actually get a whole lot more yeses, right? Because the energy shift is so different when you're
Yes.
presenting an offer and you're like, I'm 100% behind this. It is worth more than what this, more than this number. And I know the value is higher to them as well. You're just so comfortable saying it. I find then once you've made that shift, you're not getting the rejection anyway, because they're like, wow, I'm totally on board with this. They can see your confidence in it. And that just, you know, that makes it so much easier for them to say yes, I think, as well. And what do you
Agreed.
think about this? Because this is something I guess I've often sort of said to clients. I think that they've been thinking about it with their pricing as what they're placing the value on what they do. And they'll always undervalue their own stuff. But then when I say to them, well, what do you think that's worth to your client? Like right now, they can't do this. That's why they're coming to you, is because they can't figure it out themselves. They can't do it. They don't have the skills, knowledge, expertise that you have. So what do you think is actually worth to them? And it's so interesting because as soon as they change it from them valuing themselves to them valuing what it's worth to their client, it's like two totally different numbers. And it's always
Of
so interesting,
course.
isn't it? Like, what do you think is behind that? What's happening when we're perceiving a different number in those two scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of what we've talked about today. This is why when we're in sales, it's so important to think about like, how do I help them, right? A lot of the times when people
Mm-hmm.
are nervous about sales, they're very in their head about, can I close, right? It's like a scarcity, right? Like, am I going to close? What if they say no? Like all of the things, right? But if we shift the perspective to like, how do I help them? Like go in, actually
Mm-hmm.
listen, right? Like, what are your challenges, right? How can
Yeah.
I, like, what do you want to achieve? How do you actually help them? If you give them a solution, they will buy. And even if you close 1 in 3, 33% close rate is very good. So like if you get rejected 2 out of 3 times, that's okay. And you got to get good with that. Okay. But,
Mm-hmm.
when we focus on service and we focus on like, again, as you mentioned, when you say, how are you going to help them? And not just in the container, right? Like
Yes.
the ripple effect of the thing that they learn, they will have forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so not just what you do with them in the container, but outside of that for the years to come, what is that worth? And right now they are blocked around it. They cannot achieve it. There's like money locked up for them that they are like, they can't
Mm-hmm.
access without you. So like,
Yes.
again, when you shift it to service, when you shift it to like them plus the exponential butterfly effect of everything they're going to achieve in their future life because you help them, that's going to change the value. Like, it's almost like, I hate to say, like, it's like priceless, but like, it is a priceless thing because you're saving them time to access more money. They need those skills to access more money. It's not that by hiring you that suddenly they're going to unlock all of this. It's going to be this like magical landslide and manifest it. No, they still need to do the work. And remember that, like, they need to show up to the container.
Yeah,
I'm very, very
absolutely.
specific and picky with who I take on because I'm like, I want to know that we are going to make both of our times worth it. We're both very busy people, right? And so they have to be ready to show up 100%. So if you know that you are, expect that they will do the same. And you can only do what you're in control of and what you're responsible for, and you're going to do your best, right? So that's a big thing, focusing on like what you can do. Not just like, oh my God, this like perceived value, will I deliver it? Like you'll only know if you're going to deliver it when you do it, right? Again, be present. Worrying about the
Yes.
future, projected from the past, it's not helpful.
I love that. It's so true. And it just shows there's so much behind everything that we're doing in business, the actions that we're taking, the behaviors, how much it can just be from that programming that we have that we're not even potentially aware of. And it feels like it's normal because it's been embedded for so long. It's sort of like it's actually true. This is fact. This is how the world is. This is how we are. And, I think it's just amazing the more that you dive into it and uncover these little things, what you've been carrying with you or what's been influencing your decisions, which is
Totally.
so just amazing. You've been really generous today with so much knowledge. I'm
This is so fun.
Yeah, I'm absolutely loving it. You have shared so much value. I'm sure anyone listening right now who doesn't have a notebook, you're going to be putting this one on your playlist to go back and listen to when you've got a pen and paper and take down the notes, because Kyra has just shared an amazing amount in there, and so many things I think to reflect on, to ask questions. And you did share that you have something in your newsletter, which is great, and we'll make sure we link that up in the show notes as well. Did you have something that you wanted to leave us with? Is there something that we've left on the table that you were like, oh, let's not close this off without sharing this one thing, a takeaway thought? Yeah, just whatever's coming up for you right now.
The biggest thing is, if you know there's something you need to do, like this is like the biggest thing, just like take inventory of all the big things. We can get lost in the busy work and make a million excuses, but what is it that you're telling yourself that is the scariest thing that you know you need to do? And for some reason, it's on the proverbial shelf. You're not taking action towards it. That thing is the thing that you need to move towards. And the biggest thing to do is create step one, right? We often think like the farther away it is, we're like, there's more mental barriers. We're like, oh, so far, and how will I do it? And like, I have like, I don't know where to start, just create one step.
Yeah.
We only need the next step. And then that makes us feel like, oh, there's momentum and the next step, right? The faster we do that and the sooner we do that, the more we're going to accelerate and close the gap to that even bigger dream. The second thing I would say, think even bigger, right? Like bigger than whatever you're thinking right now, make that small, because that will make that feel even more achievable. So again, like whatever it is that you need to do, like watch movies where everyone's like a multimillionaire, get in contact with multimillionaires, right? Read books around finance, right? Like change your money mindset, because that's going to change how you take action in this world, right? How you invest money, what you do with money, how you leverage money, and really what you'll ultimately create for yourself. So those are kind of the two most important things I would say. And yes, if you would like to find me, I do a weekly newsletter. It's only once a week. It's like a 10-minute training on all things mindset around success, money, that good stuff, getting to your upper limits, or breaking through rather. And that's just winwithkyra.com/money. It's very simple. And then if you're looking just for more information to work with me privately, I'm just at generatemindsetcurrency.com.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. We'll link those up in the show notes. So dive through that weekly newsletter. It sounds like absolute gold. So thank you. I think that sounds amazing. And I really want to just share my appreciation that you've come on here and had so much to share with us today. I think no matter where you are in your journey, like we said, if you're still in corporate, if you're just starting out in entrepreneurship, or if you're already in the multiple 6-figure, 7-figure, reaching for 8 range, I think there was so much in that we can take away and, really think about how we're operating today. So I appreciate your time, Kyra. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jess. This was great.
Thank you.